Hi you two! It's time for the next chapter of George's Marvellous Medicine. So the last chapter I read to you was a crane for Grandma. So Grandma was so stuck in the house that a ginormous crane needed to lift her out of there. And then when she got out, she hopped on Jack Frost the pony, raced and galloped around the farmyard, and then eventually had to sleep in the barn because there was no room for her in the house. But I kind of think it serves her right for being so mean, don't you? All right, our next chapter is Mr. Kranky's great idea. You need to be listening really carefully because don't forget, you're going to be using this chapter to help you retell it in your own story. So you need to be listening carefully for any good words that you could magpie, any similes, any fantastic expanded noun phrases, any ideas, okay? So listening ears on. Are you ready? The next day, George's father came down to breakfast in a state of greater excitement than ever. "I've been awake all night thinking about it," he cried. "About what, Dad?" George asked him. "About your marvellous medicine, of course. We can't stop now, my boy. We must start making more of it at once. More and more and more." The giant saucepan had been completely emptied the day before because there had been so many sheep and pigs and cows and bullocks to be dosed. "But why do you need more, Dad?" George asked. "We've done all our own animals, and we've made Grandma feel as frisky as a ferret, even though she does have to sleep in the barn." "My dear boy," cried Mr. Kranky, "we need barrels and barrels of it, tons and tons. Then we'll sell it to every farmer in the world so that all of them can have giant animals. We'll build a marvellous medicine factory and sell the stuff in bottles at £5 a time. We'll become rich and you will become famous." "But wait a minute, Dad," George said. "There's no waiting," cried Mr. Kranky, working himself up so much that he put butter in his coffee and milk on his toast. "Don't you understand what this tremendous invention of yours is going to do to the world? Nobody will ever go hungry again." "Why won't they?" asked George. "Because one giant cow will give 50 buckets of milk a day," cried Mr. Kranky, waving his arms. "One giant chicken will make 100 fried chicken dinners, and one giant pig will give you 1,000 pork chops. It's tremendous, my dear boy. It's fantastic. It'll change the world." "But wait a minute, Dad," George said again. "Oh, don't keep saying wait a minute," shouted Mr. Kranky. "There isn't a minute to wait. We must get cracking at once." "Oh, do calm down, my dear," Mrs. Kranky said from the other end of the table. "And stop putting marmalade on your cornflakes." There he is, getting himself very excited. "The heck with my cornflakes," cried Mr. Kranky, leaping up from his chair. "Come on, George, let's get going. And the first thing we'll do is make one more saucepanful as a tester." "But, Dad," said little George, "the trouble is—" "There won't be any trouble, my boy," cried Mr. Kranky. "How can there possibly be any trouble? All you've got to do is put the same stuff into the saucepan as you did yesterday. And while you're doing it, I'll write down each and every item. That's how we'll get the magic recipe." "But, Dad," George said, "please listen to me." "Why don't you listen to him?" Mrs. Kranky said. "The boy's trying to tell you something." But Mr. Kranky was too excited to listen to anyone but himself. "And then," he cried out, "when the new mixture is ready, we'll test it out on an old hen, just to make absolutely sure we've got it right. And after that, we'll all shout, 'Hooray!' and build a giant factory." "But, Dad—" "Go on then. What is it you want to say?" "I can't possibly remember all the hundreds of things I put into the saucepan to make the medicine," George said. "Of course you can, my dear boy," cried Mr. Kranky. "I'll help you. I'll jog your memory. You'll get it in the end. You'll see if you don't. Now then, what was the very first thing that you put in?" "I went up to the bathroom first," George said. "I used a lot of things in the bathroom and on Mummy's dressing table." "Come on then," cried Mr. Kranky. "Up we go to the bathroom." When they got there, they found, of course, a whole lot of empty tubes and empty aerosols and empty bottles. "That's great," said Mr. Kranky. "That tells us exactly what you used. And if anything is empty, it means you used it." So Mr. Kranky started making a list of everything that was empty in the bathroom. Then they went to Mrs. Kranky's dressing table. "A box of powder," said Mr. Kranky, writing it down. "Helga's hair set. Flour of turnips perfume. Terrific, this is going to be easy. Where did you go next?" "To the laundry room," George said. "But are you sure you haven't missed anything out up here, Dad?" "Well, that's up to you, me boy," Mr. Kranky said. "Have I?" "I don't think so," George said. So down they went to the laundry room, and once again Mr. Kranky wrote down the names of all the empty bottles and cans. "My goodness me, what a mass of stuff you used!" he cried. "No wonder it did magic things. Is that the lot?" "No, Dad, it's not," George said, and he led his father out to the shed where the animal medicines were kept and showed him the 5 big empty bottles up on the shelf. Mr. Kranky wrote down all their names. "Anything else?" Mr. Kranky said. "Oh, there they are, look. There's Mr. Kranky writing everything down on the list. I'm pretty sure they've forgotten some things. I'm sure there was a greasy red lipstick somewhere." Little George scratched his head and thought, but he couldn't remember having put anything else in. Mr. Kranky leapt into his car and drove down to the village and bought new bottles and tubes and cans of everything on the list. He then went to the vet and got a fresh supply of all the animal medicines George had used. "Now, show me how you did it, George," he said. "Come along, show me exactly how you mixed them all together." There we go, all the ingredients. Do you think it's going to work? I'm not so sure. Don't quite seem as many ingredients on that list as the medicine that George mixed in the first place. What do you think? Okay, come back tomorrow for the next chapter, which is called Marvellous Medicine number 2. And don't forget, when you're doing your writing today, if you want to keep listening to this chapter of the story to help you with your ideas. Okay, see you again tomorrow. Bye.